Hello everyone. So we're talking about teaching strategies that meet curriculum goals. In our book, Beam and Pinky define this as that which leads a classroom from the first day of school to the last day of school. We're looking at three different types of curriculum that they discuss in the book, even though there's a few more mentioned. We looked at planned curriculum, implemented curriculum, and hidden curriculum. So planned curriculum is basically everything that we want to do, everything that the state requires of us, everything that the division might ask for us to teach. It's written in those neat lesson plans that we've put together with those standards and objectives and assessment tools. That's our planned curriculum. And of course, the best laid plans oftentimes never take place. So what we end up with is our implemented curriculum. What parts of that planning that actually took place in the classroom that day? That implemented curriculum is what ends up happening. And sometimes we don't quite meet the mark on the plan, but we do implement part of it. And the last step that we're looking at here is those moments where we implement the curriculum, or as much of it as we are hoping to get through, and we go off on this sort of side track, this hidden curriculum. What ends up happening sort of organically as students discuss, as we begin to give our 2 cents about the curriculum, and we put our own flavor in it, we look at this and say, look, here's the other parts of this curriculum that you might not have thought about. Or here's where it is in the real world and how it takes place there that maybe wasn't part of your book. So that hidden curriculum, I feel like, is really the most important of all of them, because I think this is where we hook students. This is where learning takes place. This is where you have what they call those aha moments, where students are genuinely interested in the content, they want to know more, we've pulled them in and we've got them. That hidden curriculum is what happens that almost never gets written down. And sometimes you go back at the end of the lesson and say to yourself, wow, here's my plan, I didn't get very far. And yet you did, because a lot of it was in between the lines. You really didn't quite write it down, but it got covered. So some of the strategies for measuring these curriculum that we implement, I think the most important, obviously, are the formative. While summative is important, the SOLs and maybe a WIDA test that you're measuring for language, those are very important. But above all, I think formative assessments help us guide our instruction. They help us understand what did they not get. So a few of the ones that I like to use, one of them is a take on the daily exit ticket. And rather than hand out slips of paper with questions on them, I usually will just list the questions more for myself. And as we're going through, I'll highlight, look, we just covered that, so I highlight that question. They should know this by the end of the hour. And I'll pick those 3 or 4, whatever it might be, and I'll say, all right, here's the questions at the end of the classroom that I think you should be able to answer. And either I will do it individually, or I might even say, here's the 3 questions, answer them as a group, and provide me with that feedback. I also will sometimes say, okay, let's mix it up today, and instead of doing that exit ticket, just give me 3 things in a bulleted list that you learned today. They have to be something that we covered in the content, but give me 3 things that you learned. Another thing that I might do is ask them to explain it to a 2nd grader. And this tactic I like a lot because it forces students to really think about the content, summarize it, and how do I regurgitate it back in a way that somebody who wasn't here and isn't even in my grade level would understand. And obviously this also asks them to look at vocabulary and take it down a few levels. So I will always sort of find ways to make them summarize, make them bring it down. But I like this one a lot because it really makes them put it into perspective. Many of them oftentimes have siblings in lower grades, so they think about that and how would I explain it to my brother or sister. Then the last thing I like to do on occasion is what I learned, what was intriguing, and what I still wonder. So here is a list of 3 things, but they're very specific. And the first one is always, here's one thing I learned about the content today. And then the second one is, here's something I was surprised by, I was intrigued by, or I maybe want to know more about. And then the last one is, what question do I still have? And over and above, this is always the most difficult for students. What question can I write down that doesn't show I wasn't paying attention or doesn't show I wasn't listening? And so I oftentimes will have to sort of encourage students and say, look, it's okay if you didn't get it all. It's okay if you didn't understand it. I need to know what you don't know so that tomorrow when we pick it up, I know where to go. And so giving them that sort of release, I think, is important. And forcing them to ask a question of some type is important. So those are the ways that I think are important to measure the curriculum, whether it's planned or implemented or hidden, whatever it might be. I think those are ways that we can use those strategies to figure out, did they get it or not? And answer that question. I planned it, taught it, why didn't they get it?